Can we maximize the potential of the Kaido starter deck? Let's talk about it. What's up, captains? Welcome back to the Other Decks. My name's Casual Dobo, and today we're going to be creating our own custom Kaido starter decks. Now, as I mentioned in the gameplay video that I did a couple days ago with basically Hawkins, you know that typically with Bandai starter decks, they don't put everything in, at least all the good stuff. Typically, the most valuable cards are going to only have 2 copies, as opposed to the 4 copies that are allowed in a deck. So I wanted to see what would happen if we pretended that we bought 2 starter decks and then had full playsets of everything, and what the ratios for that might look like. And honestly, this whole thing came about because unlike the Digimon trading card game, which I do a lot of content for, we don't know quite yet what the golden ratios for cards are going to be. There's still a lot of very important questions that we need to figure out, and obviously this is very early stages because the game isn't even released yet in Japan. But you know, we're wondering how many is too many 2-cost cards, how many is too many 9-cost cards, right? And so these are all things that we're trying to figure out, and it's honestly very exciting to do so as a content creator and trying to figure out all of these things. And honestly, that's probably the most exciting part about making One Piece TCG content, just because none of this is really set in stone, and so we're sort of able to explore and kind of learn as the game releases and as other people learn. But this is going to be my best guess at what the ratio should be for a typical Kaido starter deck strategy. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about that we don't necessarily talk about in Digimon is the Dawn curve, or the energy curve, because this, unlike Digimon, is a game where the energy source, the mana resource, is constantly coming back to you. And so we need to figure out what the progression of power should be turn by turn. And I think a very important way to show this is through a Dawn curve. So let's go ahead and check that out right now. Alright, and here is the Dawn curve that I have for my custom starter deck. By the way, before I explain what any of these numbers are, if you are enjoying the video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. That would help out our growth immensely, especially as we do more One Piece TCG content. And then let me know your thoughts on all of this, right? Kind of love to hear from you, the community, about what you're thinking about this presentation of the Dawn curve, the ratios in this deck. Would love to hear from you, so leave a comment down below. Anyway, back to this. So I did nerd out a little bit, and I put a bunch of things into an Excel sheet. That's about as nerdy as it gets. But essentially what it popped out was a graph that shows each card and technically the number of cards per Dawn cost category. And then when I go into the deck profile, you'll see what all of this actually means. But essentially, we're running a couple of different things. The main thing I want to focus on here is that we are running a majority of this deck is in the sort of 3 to 4 cost area. And I think that makes a lot of sense for the Kaido starter deck, just because the main strategy of Kaido is to win in the mid to late game. And so a lot of that early game is not so much putting characters onto the board, but surviving until you get some of your bigger pieces available, as well as the Dawn available to play those bigger pieces. So things like Jack, Queen, King, etc. So that's why I didn't prioritize too much in the 1s and 2s. I still think they're very important because it obviously very much sucks to not have a turn 1 play, but I wasn't really prioritizing having that turn 1 play available to me. And I do think that the lower end stuff, based on my observations of the One Piece TCG, are still pretty important because they have counter potential. And I'll talk about counters and the number of counters we've run in just a bit. But yeah, that is the Dawn curve for my custom Kaido starter deck. So now let's go ahead and jump right into the deck profile. Alright, and here we are at the deck profile, and this comes to us courtesy of the One Piece-cardgame.dev website from the same team that made the Digimon card.dev, which I use very often. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your work on this. Some features are still being built, but so far it looks absolutely fantastic. So thank you. Also, I'm going to leave a link either to the deck profile itself or the website, and if you look around, I think it's in the menu space, there is a button to donate if you wish to do so. That team works very, very hard. But anyway, starting us off with our deck profile, we do have one copy of our leader Kaido. You can only have one of a leader, but this Kaido is cool. 5,000 power and has the ability activate main Dawn -7, so that is returning 7 Dawn from your either cost area or things that are attached to your characters. But return 7 of those Dawn to your Dawn deck, and then you get to trash the top card of your opponent's life. This is very similar to some Digimon green hybrid abilities, where you get to melt a security card. Is pretty much the same concept. Alright, now going into our characters, we do have 4 copies of Black Maria, 2,000 power, but has the keyword blocker. So this one I wanted as 4 of, just because I think blocker, especially in the early meta of the One Piece trading card game, is going to be super important. So full playset of our blockers. Next up, got 3 copies of Jin Rummy. This is a 3,000 power Animal Kingdom pirate / smile character. Has counter plus 1,000, which is very good, and is typically our turn 1 play. Now I only have 3 copies of this just because, like I said, I don't really value the turn 1 play as much as maybe some other strategies do, but I did want enough in case I needed to have a cheap character on the field, where if I just attach 2 Dawn to it, it becomes a viable attacker into our leader, because most leaders right now are at 5,000, and that would clear the threshold at minimum. But I wanted to include enough copies of it where I would see at least 1 or 2 per game, and then if anything, I could trash it using some of our other trash mechanics that we have in the deck. Now this one might be a little bit of a spicy pick, but I only have 2 copies of Who's Who in here. So this is 3,000 power, 3 cost to play, and then on play, Dawn -1, so return 1 Dawn to your Dawn deck, and you get to KO up to one of your opponent's cost 3 or lower characters. Now, this is interesting because it's a character that has a trigger ability, so if it comes out of your life, you can trigger it and then play this card, essentially. Now, the reason I only have 2 of it, even though it's like one of our best forms of removal, is because I've seen this come out of my life way too many times when I don't want to Dawn -1. And there is some sort of discussion about whether or not you have to do the on-play Dawn -1. I believe in Digimon, unless it's like a Yume ability, you have to do it, and maybe this is a translation thing, but I don't see Yume in the wording here. So that leads me to believe that I have to do the Dawn -1 if it comes out of my life, and that sometimes is just a real feels bad, especially if I'm trying to plan ahead and look at my hand and see what I can do. I guess as a counter to everything I literally just said, you don't have to trigger the trigger abilities when it comes out of your life, so you can just bring it to hand and not do anything. But then you lose out on the ability to have a free character on the field. So yeah, I just didn't even want to deal with the heartache of that, so I only put 2 copies in here. It should be enough where if I need to see it, I should be able to. But not to the point where it becomes detrimental to my strategy. Because yeah, I think if you saw, I believe it's Astaroth's video on his channel showing the gameplay that I did with him, I played a Who's Who out of life that kind of ruined my whole entire strategy. I was like this close away from getting the 9 cost Kaido out onto the field. But yeah, that is my reasoning for the 2 copies of Who's Who. Let me know in the comments below if you agree or disagree. Next up, we do have 3 copies of Sasaki. This is another Animal Kingdom pirate. On play, Dawn -1, and you get to draw a card. It does have 4,000 power, so you only need 1 more Dawn attached to it to make it viable, and does have counter potential with counter plus 1,000. Overall, I think Sasaki is a very fantastic card, and that's why I wanted to keep at least 3 copies of it. And then next up, we do have 3 copies of Sheep's Head. So this is an Animal Kingdom pirate / smile character. Has counter potential plus 1,000, 4,000 power, so once again, you only need another Dawn attached to it in order for it to be a viable attacker into your opponent's leader, and 2 cost. So this is a very cheap and easy swing. This is mainly the card I'm looking for in the early game of this deck, and this is going to be my primary attacker for the most part, unless I see something else like an X-Drake or something. Now, up until this point, we've pretty much looked at 3 copies of each, and obviously max amount of cards you can have is 4, and you're probably wondering why. It's so I can make room for this. I have 4 copies of Jack, so it is a 3 cost to play Animal Kingdom Pirate, 4,000 power, but on play, you can discard 1 card from your hand, then reveal 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck and put it into the thing as active. The thing being the cost area. So this allows you to ramp your Dawn, which is incredibly vital, especially when you're doing so many things that remove Dawn from your cost area. And it gets to clean up your hand a little bit. And the reason I value this so much is because Onigashima, right? It's one of the most important pieces you need to see in the Kaido starter deck, but once you see it, there's no stage removal currently. And so if you get a bunch of those back into your hand, they're kind of dead cards, to be honest. Jack solves that problem by being able to discard those extra Onigashimas while still having some extra added benefit of giving you an active Dawn. And it has counter potential with counter plus 1000. Overall, I think that this is one of the most valuable cards to come out of the Kaido starter deck. And 4,000 power isn't anything to sneeze at, just need 1 Dawn attached to it and it can start swinging. Moving on, we do have 3 copies of Ulti. So Ulti is a 4 cost to play, 5,000 power Animal Kingdom Pirate, which says on play, Dawn -1, play up to 1 page 1 character card with a cost of 4 or less from your hand without paying the memory cost. In particular, in the Kaido starter deck, I don't necessarily value that page 1 combo unless it's, turn 2 or turn 3, when that extra presence of attackers could be very valuable. But if I see ulti or page 1 late game and I need to see both of them in my hand, I just don't think it's that great. Personally, I would rather keep ulti and page 1 as counter potential so that I can let the other stars of the deck shine, like, Queen, King, etc. So that's why I bumped ulti as well as page 1, which we'll see later, down to 3 as opposed to the 4 that it comes with. Next up, I do have 4 copies of X-Drake. So this is a 3 cost to play, 5,000 power Marine / Animal Kingdom Pirate. And he's a vanilla. He does have counter potential, but really this is probably our cheapest attacker who doesn't need Dawn to swing into our leader. And because he doesn't need Dawn attached to him in order to attack, that's why I value him a lot, and I have 4 copies of him. Because realistically, I know I've talked about like attaching Dawn and they become viable. The Kaido starter deck doesn't really focus on attaching Dawn, it's using Dawn as an additional resource to do other things. So having something that doesn't need that additional bonus to attack naturally is just overall very good. So that's why I have 4 copies of X-Drake. Next up, I do have 3 copies of Queen. So it's a 5 cost to play, 6,000 power Animal Kingdom Pirate. It has the blocker keyword, which is, as I said earlier with Black Maria, very important, especially for the early meta of the game. And then on play Dawn -1, you can draw 2, trash 1. So any purple players from Digimon would recognize this ability. It is very good, and it kind of ties into what I said about Jack in that it cleans up our hand a little bit and also has draw power, which is incredibly important in any game, to be honest. And it has counter potential with counter plus 1000. I would say that there's an argument to be made that this is the most valuable card to come out with the Kaido starter deck. I put it right there with Jack, but obviously I only include 3 of it. And that's mostly because 5 cost, especially with all the returning Dawn you have, all those mechanics, 5 costs to play is a little steep. I think 3 is a good number because I'm able to see the Queen when I need to see the Queen, and obviously a 6,000 power blocker is kind of wild. Very fantastic card. Alright, moving on. As I mentioned in the Ulti preview, I have 3 copies of Page 1. So this is a 4 cost to play, 6,000 power Animal Kingdom Pirate. This is a very strong card because it does require your opponent to counter at least once if you're attacking into the leader. Actually, you need it twice because ties win in One Piece. So they need to bump up their leader to 7,000 power in order to prevent that. So Page 1 is a very solid card, counter plus 1,000. But I kept it at the same ratio as Ulti just because, like I said, I'm not really looking for that combo. I do want to see it when I can, but it is kind of in the... anything past 3 cost Dawn is what I'm considering sort of the mid to higher end on the Dawn cost curve. And so I didn't want to see too many Page 1s. and that's why I put it down to 3. Next up, we do have 3 copies of King, so this is 6 to play, so pretty expensive, but 7,000 power is very good, and it has a fantastic on-play ability. On play, Dawn -1, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. King is a very, very, very strong card, especially in the early game of One Piece, just because a lot of people are going to be running a lot of, I think, 4 cost or less characters. That's going to be the bulk of what most decks entail, and so the ability to remove them on play is very good. And then 7,000 power is fantastic. Your opponent needs to essentially use a counter event card or sacrifice 3 cards from their hand in order to, potentially counter this. As soon as King goes on the board, your opponent feels the pressure. Now you're probably wondering to yourself, if it's so good, how come you're not running 4 of it? Because of the 6 cost. As I mentioned before, the Dawn curve is very interesting. We do want to play sort of in that 3 to 4 range, and so 6 is just a little bit out of it. We kind of want to see it as like a bell curve, so it's kind of bigger in the middle and then tapers off towards the edges, and King is like kind of at the edges. But I still think it's very valuable, very good, so 3 copies of it is good. If you want to put in a 4th one, you can probably replace one of the event cards, which we'll cover, but that would be my recommendation. And then rounding out the characters, we do have 2 copies of Kaido. So this is a character Kaido, 4 Emperors, Animal Kingdom Pirates. It is 9 costs to play, so this is definitely like your late game finisher type of card. Has 10,000 power, which is wild. On play, Dawn -5, you can KO one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 6 or less, which is really good. And then this character gains Rush for the turn. So you play it, use 5 of the 9 that you tapped, return that to Dawn deck. You can delete a character with cost 6 or less, which, if you're playing against an opponent and they suspect you have the Kaido, they might try and put down a bunch of blockers. You can KO one of them instantaneously, and then rush in for game, essentially. Rush in the One Piece TCG works a lot like Digimon, where it gets played. Normally, characters have summoning sickness. If it has Rush, it can attack the turn it comes into play. But yeah, 9 costs is a bit much, to be honest, and so that's why I only run 2 of them. Alright, going into the event cards, I have 2 copies of All-Star Calamities. So this is a 4 cost to play event. Main ability is draw 1 card, then add 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck to the cost area active. So this is card draw and ramp built into the same card. Also has a trigger ability that says activate this card's main effect, which is kind of wild. And so I think it's pretty solid card. I only have 2 of it just because, other than ramp, it doesn't really do much for us. It's a really good, I think, win more strategy. Because honestly, 4 costs to play is still fairly steep, especially when I'd rather put a character onto the board. I'm really only hoping that this comes out of the life area, so I can use the trigger ability. And if not, I might use it as an emergency thing if I'm really not seeing the pieces I need, but most likely it's going to become fodder for Jack or Queen. Next up, we have 3 copies of Brachio Bomber. So this is a 6 cost to play event, but it says main ability, KO one of our opponent's characters with a play cost of 6 or less. Then add 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck to the cost area active. So this, I think, is overall a better event card than All-Star Calamities, in that it is targeted removal and ramp. It also has a trigger ability, but trigger ability is not as good. It's just add 1 card from your Dawn deck to the cost area active. So has the ramp ability, no trigger or no target to removal, but that's okay. 6 cost is a little expensive, but the ability to target anything with 6 costs or less is pretty powerful. Like if you look at the Luffy starter deck, that pretty much covers every character that's in there. So no, Brachio Bomber is really good. I want it at 3 so that I can see it occasionally, maybe see in the life. Definitely not 4 copies worthy. What is 4 copies worthy is Blast Breath. So this is a 1 cost event card. So this is a counter Dawn -1. So return a Dawn to your Dawn deck, and then for the battle, your leader or one of your characters gets plus 4,000 power Now, you do need to leave one Dawn up on your cost area in order to use it, which can, be a pretty good tell or a really good bluff. They have a Blast Breath in your hand. But honestly, it's so good and has come in pretty clutch, especially, if you're bluffing it, right? I think bluffing this is actually pretty funny and a pretty interesting strategy going forward, because your opponent kind of has to, make some decisions, which I think if you're playing any sort of like competitive card game, forcing your opponent to make decisions is usually a really good thing to do. But yeah, it forces them to think about overloading a character or going into a swing slightly underpowered, if we do have this counter, and them kind of, wasting an attack, wasting some Dawn resources. So yeah, I think 4 copies of Blast Breath is very, very good. And then rounding out the deck profile, we do have 4 copies of Onigashima. So this is our stage card and probably one of the most vital pieces to come out of the Kaido starter deck. And honestly, the beautiful thing about this is the deck comes with 4 already. Like, if you're just trying to buy a starter deck to get some Onigashimas, you just need 1. I wouldn't recommend it, but you just need 1. This says activate main. You can rest this card if your leader has the Animal Kingdom Pirates trait, which thankfully Kaido does, and then add 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck to the cost area rested. So it does come in tap, so you won't be able to actively use it to cast, characters or events and stuff, but for some abilities, right? So say you have 4 active Dawn available, you can tap Onigashima, bring in that rested Dawn, and then play something like an ulti, and then you can essentially return the Dawn you just put out onto back into the Dawn deck. And that way you're not wasting any of your active Dawn, but you're still able to get some of those very powerful, very potent Dawn minus abilities, while still maintaining and staying on track for your Dawn curve, essentially. Now, are you going to be hurting if you don't see the Onigashima? You're going to be sweating a little bit, but it's, you're not going to be hurting too much. But some of those on-play Dawn -1 abilities start to add up if you don't have Onigashima, and kind of set you behind. So, if anything, because there's a built-in mulligan into the One Piece TCG, I would recommend trying to mulligan for Onigashima. So yeah, that is our custom Kaido starter deck profile. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. Do you like the ratios? Do you think I should tweak some things? Am I running too many events? Which is honestly a thought I had when I was building this. It's like, am I mistaken about the value of the ulti page 1 combo? Let me know all of your thoughts. Would love to hear them. Would love to chat about it. Overall, I think the Kaido starter deck is super fun. I've obviously played a lot of gameplay with the base version of it. I did the gameplay with basically Hawkins with this version of it, and I think it runs pretty smoothly. There might be some like minor tweaks here or there when it comes to which characters I am prioritizing, but I think the way it's built right now and the number of counters I have, which I forgot to mention, we are running 34 counters in this deck. Most of them are the plus 1000, and then obviously 4 of them are from the Blast Breath. So even if we took the Blast Breath out, we're running 30 character-based counters in here, which is over half the deck. And so that part is very important because, like I said, in the early game, I'm not too worried about, swinging or building up a massive battle area with this deck. I'm pretty content going in with like maybe 1 or 2 things, having Kaido as my primary attacker, but waiting for some of those bigger pieces so that I can go into more of those combos, maybe stall for Onigashima. But when over half the deck is counters, I think that's a pretty good spot to be in. But yeah, I think that'll do it for me. So thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. And captains, remember, build what you like, play what you love, and I'll catch you in the next video. Have a good one.